The Arizona Secretary of State's office must release the list of voters affected by the MVD glitch. So here are the details, just very quickly, because I'm sure you've heard it before, but for those of you that are a little bit unclear of who this affects, if you got your driver's license before 1996 in Arizona, you were not required to prove citizenship to get a driver's license. But after 1996 or 1996 or later, you did. So I fit into that category. I moved here in 1995. I got my Arizona driver's license in 1995, but I was not required to prove citizenship using my driver's license. The second half of this is after 2004. So if you registered to vote or you moved to a different county in Arizona in 2005 or later, you had to prove citizenship in order to register to vote. So those two things coinciding. So what happened in 2005 was anybody who had a driver's license that was dated 1996 or later was in. They looked at your driver's license and they saw, okay, this person has had to prove citizenship because they got their license after 1996. So an Arizona driver's license was considered proof of citizenship. Everybody follow so far? Makes sense. You had to show citizenship to get a license 1996 or later. So in 2005 or later, that driver's license proved you were a citizen. Here's what happened. There were people, and I fall into this category as well, of just this first part of the category. If you received a duplicate license, so you got your original license before 1996, but were issued a duplicate license after 1996, it showed the issue date on your license of whatever the duplicate date was. My last driver's license, I believe, says 2017 on it, maybe something like that, because I received a duplicate license then. Well, my license was originally issued in 1995, but the issue date of my driver's license says 2017. So there were a lot of people, over 200,000 people, that fall into the category of they got their driver's license before 1995, they were issued a duplicate after 1996, and they didn't register to vote or move to a new county until after 2004, so 2005 or later. Right now, that number is in the neighborhood of 216,000 voters in Arizona. The names have not been released. The Secretary of State said that it could lead to violence, and he said even real death, and he thought it was a dangerous thing. But he was ordered by a Superior Court judge in Arizona to release the names. An organization called EZAZ sued to have that list released. They are quoted as saying that the reason why they did this was because they wanted the county recorder's offices to have the list of names of people that fall into this category. So statistically speaking, over 60% or about 60% of the electorate in the entire state of Arizona lives in Maricopa County. So you do the math on 60, 70,000 people that live in Maricopa County that would fall into, no, actually, it would be more than that. If you looked at the number of people in Maricopa County, over 100,000 of them live here. So that's a big number when you consider our countywide elections. So the county recorder's office having these numbers. But I will tell you that there's a big difference here. If you're an American citizen, you're entitled to vote, period, end of story. If the state of Arizona, and by the way, no fault of Adrian Fontes, the Secretary of State, no fault of any of the county recorders across Arizona, including Stephen Richer, this happened, this glitch, this mistake happened 20 years ago. 2004 was when proof of citizenship to vote in state and local elections happened. It's 20 years ago. But what happened was they allowed the driver's licenses. That was the glitch. Was a mistake, but it still has to be sorted out. How many of that 216,000, and this is the big question, how many of the 216,000 voters are actually U.S. citizens that just thought they were meeting the requirement because they did what they were asked? And how many are actually not citizens that should not be voting? And then of that number, how many of them have actually ever voted? Those questions need to be answered, and they need to be answered because, as you've seen in the elections, I want you to think, and if I'm going to, just to be fair, if you do the math, if you have 216,000 people, and there's 60% of them live in Maricopa County, That's almost 130,000 people. You look at our countywide races and you look at some of the races that are coming down to minuscule numbers. That's an important number to have. Statewide, President Biden beat President Trump in the election by 10,000 votes. That's a very small percentage of 216,000. That doesn't mean that those 10,000 people were illegal voters, but it's an important enough number to be able to quell the suspicions of the voters in Arizona. There is an old adage that says you cannot over-communicate in a crisis. This is not the time for the Secretary of State or the county recorder in Maricopa County or any other county. This is not the time for them to be quiet. And I'm not saying they should make the list public. That's not what I mean. But they should be looking at numbers. If they get this list, they need to be able to cross-reference and look at the citizenship status of registered voters, and you should be telling. And I know that there is a lot on the plate of the county recorder's office. All of these people are going to be eligible to vote, but there will be challenges. So will the county recorder in Maricopa County, and I feel for Stephen Richer because he did not cause this. As a matter of fact, he was the one that found it. But this falls on his shoulders, at least until he's out of this office in January. And it falls on the Secretary of State and the other county recorders across Arizona. But their job in order to quell the suspicions of the voters in Arizona is to get that number. I'm not saying give us names. But if there are non-citizens that are registered to vote, they have to be kicked off the voter rolls. If there are non-citizens that knew they weren't eligible to vote and they voted, they need to be held accountable legally. By doing this, you're telling everybody mistakes are going to happen, but we are going to do everything we can to fix those mistakes. If you don't, as quickly as possible, tell the voters in your county and in total, and I'm throwing out numbers, I'm making these numbers up. Be clear, I'm making these numbers up. We have 216,000 people that fall into this category. Of these numbers, there are less than 2,000. There are 1,100 people that are actually ineligible to vote in Arizona. And of that 1,100 people, only 463 ever voted in an election since 2004. Now, I've completely made those numbers up. But if you give those numbers to the voters and to the citizens of Arizona, this goes away. And then people say, okay, it was a bad thing that happened. We've got a new system in place of proof of citizenship for people that Americans, that our law and the will of the people in Arizona has been enforced, that you have to prove you're a citizen to vote in state and local elections. That's being fulfilled now. We have also taken whatever that minuscule number of people is off the voter rolls, and anybody that voted that wasn't supposed to is going to be held accountable. This goes away. If the numbers get hidden, if they don't want to talk about it, if they stonewall and if they're quiet, if they just say we've rectified the problem but we're not really talking about it, it's going to continue to foster doubt. And again, I feel for Stephen Richer. I never run away from the people that I'm friends with or that I've had relationships with. I like Stephen Richer, and I understand that in Republican circles, that's not a good thing sometimes. But I think he's an honest guy. I don't think he's a dishonest man. I think he's been good in that office as far as being an honest person in that office. He's even stood up knowing it was going to train wreck his political career. I also like Adrian Fontes, who's in the opposite political party. This isn't his doing either. He had nothing to do with this. But they are stuck, and their leadership is going to be what gets the voters in Arizona to move past this and on to what's next. If they hide behind something, if they decide talking about this is the wrong thing to do, in my opinion, it's going to continue to foster doubt. We'll see. We're going to see how it gets handled, and I imagine they're going to want to make sure it's done the right way.
Thanks for watching The Mike Broomhead Show. Tap to watch the first season of Amazing Arizonans, a KTAR News podcast. You can also click the button in the middle to subscribe.